This leads us talk about building scaffoldings for others to create together and find solutions and build together. Our next talk that I'm about to announce is a lovely conversation with some design leaders that I've known for a very long time, Bob Schwartz and Alistair Hamilton. And let me just, we've worked with people who are in massive corporations and small companies and startups and manufacturers. Not many designers know what it's like to lead at that scale. So I'm excited to bring on Bob Schwartz and Aleister. And I'm gonna give you their bios real quick. By the way, Bob's bio is so impressive and long, but I can't get into all of it. Please go on to our website and take a look at the list of everybody's backgrounds as well. Bob has recently joined Mount Mary University as Dean School of Arts of the Design and Business division in August of 2020. He's the former vice president and global design and user experience, vice president of global design and user experience at GE Healthcare. He led this from 2007 to 2020, and he oversaw as many as 6 studios in 5 countries with 60 team members, was responsible for the global design function, encompassing industrial design, design thinking, human factors, ergonomics, user experience, environmental design, and design research. As a strategic driver of organic business growth, his organization focused on the look, feel, and usability and end-to-end digital physical experience of GEHC products and services. Bob was also the GE Healthcare Global Executive sponsor of the People with Disabilities Network and has been a faculty member advisor of GE Corporate. He, outside of GE, he has, there's so many things, in 2015, IDSA gave Bob, noted him as one of the top 50 most notable industrial designers in the last 50 years. He's a fellow of IDSA and numerous awards to count. Let's see. Oh, and let's see. Recently, he was inducted to the IDSA's Academy of Fellows, and that was in 2007 World Congress of Industrial Design. And he has a master's in industrial design from Rhode Island School of Design, where he's a roadie. Okay, and then Alistair, again, another amazing design leader who's led in massive corporations, enterprise scale, knows what it takes to really connect and lead at that level. Alistair is a highly experienced design leader who has worked with multidisciplinary design teams in consumer and enterprise businesses. Alistair is the design director of physical stores for Amazon. Prior to his current position, he was also an Amazon design director of Amazon Prime Video, as well as the design director of Kindle. Alistair translates market and user insights into successful differentiating products, enjoys being in a team and in companies who have the courage to lead, take risks, and embrace new perspectives and demand design excellence. His specialties have been design strategy, industrial design, user experience, research, innovation, mobile computing, mobile search, and retail technology. All right. Without further ado, I'd love to bring you guys on. See if Bob and Alistair are available. And by the way, these guys have known each other for quite some time. When you're playing at that strata, how many people can you, share war stories with and know the nuances of these things, right? Well, let's see. I think Kelly's trying to get these guys on. One thing that I want to talk about while we're waiting for Bob and Alistair come in, design, they're here?
We're here. Yes.
Good morning.
Hi, guys.
There we are.
Good to see you guys.
Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much for coming on today. And, helping us celebrate, and also just sharing so much of your insights about what it's like to, lead design in these corporate spaces. I guess the one thing I wanted to start with too is, how has the pandemic, how are you guys moving through the pandemic, and how are you finding joy and staying, creative? It's a tough time for everyone, but just curious, like, what do you guys do?
Who would you like to begin? Which one of us would you like to begin?
Either one, whoever. Bob, you're talking, so why don't you go?
Okay. Hi, Alistair.
Morning, Bob.
We had a chance to chat yesterday about this gig we're doing today, and looking forward to it. I think we've entered an era of, and I'll credit my friend Bruce Nussbaum with this, the era of post-pandemic design. Everything needs to be redesigned. And maybe you heard that term here first, but I'll attribute it to Bruce. Everything needs to be redesigned, certainly in the role that I now have, in this pivot I made in my career. I just got off a leadership call where we're reimagining everything again, because now as the world is thawing out, suddenly we do have 61 classrooms with technology in them that can be hybrid or high flex or synchronous or asynchronous. What are we going to do with that now that we have the latitude, to come back? And I know, certainly talking to my colleagues in global jobs, many of them are still not back at work yet. Many of them are still working remotely, and I suspect many of you are here on this call. Alistair?
Yeah, well, last year was, amazing in so many ways, challenging, but I think as we start to sort of reconnect and get back into the office for the things that really matter, you're realizing just how much value there is in that, and how well we did really getting by, and what an accelerant it was for a lot of the technology behind interacting with people in different places. I think one of my bigger learnings recently, which sounds painfully obvious in a way, was we were doing a lot of things to connect remote teams in different countries with global teams that we almost took for granted as those being the seeds of what we needed to do well during the pandemic. And so the idea of remote work was really already happening for all kinds of people. It just wasn't mainstream. So there's a lot to be learned, and that will get a lot better in the future as a result of all the accelerated innovation.
For you guys, you're at the top, I think, near the top, right there. Everybody in design, throughout the years, we've always talked about design needs a seat at the table, and here you guys are there, speaking to C-suite advisors and huge corporations. What kind of conversations have been going on in the last year? And we've talked, the world has changed, right? Usually when it comes to design, our customers are not ready for change, and yet the world has changed. So now, are they turning to design and saying, oh my God, help us out? or are they saying design is, an aesthetic sensibility. We don't need design right now. We're cutting corners. What's their notion or awareness of what design can do for where they are?
I guess the first thing I would say is, if you think it's easy, you try it. It's a wild ride, but it's certainly interesting. I would say, first of all, business is going on. Business has to go on. You still have to deliver to your customers. There's still this huge digital transformation going on in the world. The collision to the digital and physical is happening. Aleister's like the first guy I would turn to talk more about that. So all that's still happening. At the same time, the dynamic of how it's happening has changed completely. I would say, if anything, productivity's gone up, not down. If you're in a manufacturing or supply chain situation, obviously it's really challenging now, and there's a shortage of everything. Just look at the auto industry and the chip problem that they have. But the people that I talk to, and certainly the world that I'm in now, it hasn't stopped. I mean, we're still going like crazy 24/7, keeping the wheels turning. And some of it's a little more challenging, but actually some of it's a little more efficient. And we've kind of accelerated into the use of tools to drive those efficiencies because, the show must go on. Alistair?
Yeah, I agree. I think, Angela, to your question, I think our leadership just turned to everyone. It wasn't just design, and it was, how do we figure this out, and how do we try things and embrace change? And it was constant change because a lot of things we tried initially didn't work, and other things did. And so, in some ways, that's status quo. It's just that the context around it shifted dramatically, as we all know.
Well, and I would imagine if so much is constantly changing, is business in general more open to the process of iteration? I mean, design is so comfortable with iteration, and yet business is like, let's pick one thing. Why is it failing when they don't realize that is change, and that's iterating, that's moving through options to find the best solution? Does this now help business understand that there's a process to change, right?
Well, it's the old necessity is the mother of invention thing. I mean, God help us, the amount of innovation that have come out of wars or NASA or some of the other unexpected places or unfortunate places. I think we're seeing that again. Things that were huge barbed wire barriers in business and companies. If you wanted to move into, some of the things we're doing now, starting out with working remotely the way we are, it was a non-starter, but suddenly everybody had to embrace it, and they had to do it fast. I know, there's some industries where I asked the question, well, how was your year? And they'd say, I had the best year I ever had. It was either lucrative or productive. And so I think, we just saw, it's Tom Friedman's book, Life in the Age of Accelerations. Thank you for being late. We're accelerating. It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yes. Oh my God, that's a great point. We are accelerating. And I think the new constant is change. I mean, I feel like we're at the end of this pendulum where now it's swinging back, and let's say that let's note that it doesn't have to go straight back, right? We can inform where this pendulum swings to next, but we are in that next 10 years in an incredible phase of change. Aleister, how do you see it?
Well, I think this has been an amplifier of how unanticipated change can accelerate innovation, just as those examples that Bob just shared. And I think it's helpful to have that be obvious in front of mind, because it's when things don't seem to be changing that it gets hard, right? Whether the company's cruising along and doing really well, it doesn't want to change things. Innovation is risk, and so having such a present scenario to say, well, what if this happened? What would we do? How would we accelerate? It's old scenario planning, which we've all done in design, but sometimes we don't imagine a scenario like this and how it could move a product forward or change a way we approach things. So, maybe that's a maybe. Like maybe this is something that we can try and hold on to as a what if, and challenge ourselves and our colleagues to work with other things. Like, what's the next big surprise?
Most design professionals, I think they're not most. There are those that are, I talk about people who are on the entrepreneur track, running their own business, being on the consultancy side a bit more, those on the entrepreneur track within corporations. And there's so many that wonder, what's it like to move up and lead within a corporation, right? And you guys are in really massive enterprise scale teams. What's the advice that you guys can give to someone who wants to, scale that environment, right? And be in that type of business, in that affecting design from the inside? What's it take? What kind of mindset? How do you understand what are the challenges leading in enterprise scale companies?
Well, if I were to start, I would say, yeah, part of it's what you know, that's table stakes. 90% of it is your own behavior. And, to sort of live a life of curiosity, to be able to know how to make it about everybody else and not yourself, and not run around necessarily waving your hands over your head about how great design is or all the things that you're going to bring when you go to a new company, but to help others solve big, hairy problems that they have. If you can do that and develop trust and respect, people won't want to work with you unless they trust you. Suddenly, at least what I found is others start to tell your story for you. Certainly when I went into GE, design was a highly valued creative resource, but it wasn't strategic. We simply started talking about design as an organic driver of business growth. We just took the ground. And then we looked for leaders, senior leaders who had really big problems that they hadn't been able to solve, spending millions with maybe some traditional business consultancies. And we used our design thinking tools to help them solve their problem in new ways. And if we were successful, and in a case or two where we were early on, all of a sudden it created this conversation that they were driving. It's kind of like some of you may remember when the Industrial Designers Society of America, IDSA, got into a relationship with Business Week magazine to publish the results of the IDEA Awards. All of a sudden, for the first time in history, we had a business publication talking about design rather than design talking about design. Well, the analog is the same. And I found that to be very effective. The other piece of it that's really important in jobs like I've had, and I know Alistair has had, which are highly global, teams all around the world. Most of the people on my team live in other countries, is to be culturally intelligent. And actually there is some great books about cultural intelligence you should read. That's really a serious thing. Everybody speaks English, but everybody doesn't understand English. Some words don't translate. Some concepts don't translate. You're working across foreign exchange. You're working across religious beliefs. You're working across customs. You're working across how interviews are conducted and who gets to be in the food chain. Stuff you never get taught about in school or in business. It's joy by 1,000 cuts, or smiles, or misery. So you have to have that cultural intelligence in your pocket. Alistair? Unless you have a question for me, Angela.
Well, I just wanted to speak to what you were saying. You were talking about helping the other divisions. I think sometimes there is a notion from design to come in and say, here we are, we're the star, we're the creators, we're the creatives, we're the change agents, we'll do it all, you sit back. But I know that working with and talking with so many of you guys who are there, rising up there and helping within corporations, it is about helping those other divisions to accomplish their initiatives. So in some sense, they are your first customer, right? It's not necessarily GE's end consumer customer, but your customers are those other divisions within that company, and helping them with their initiatives.
Yes, it's both. And it's also how you recruit the army you don't control. In my case in GE, or even in Procter & Gamble, where eventually there was 400 of us, there was 60 of us, but there was 9,000 engineers and 1,500 marketers spread in 200 countries. You can't compete with that. But if you can sort of help other people solve their problems and invite them into your landscape, opening the doors wide, all of a sudden they're become a virtual part of your team. And that can be very powerful.
Yeah, they become your representatives, right? Aleister, how's this for you?
Well, it's a massive question, but just to riff off of a couple of the themes, if you start with like we are the creatives, then you're pretty much dead in the water right there. Everyone's creative.
Yes.
Right? And there's a big, and over the last 20 years or probably many more, the lines that people like to put up around disciplines and that have blurred tremendously. And so what's unique about design's role in mass collaborations, and it's, I think most of the time, is that we start with questions and curiosity, and therefore our most durable tool is learning, right? And so recognizing that connection of constant learning and then problem solving. Finding problems is a lot harder than solving problems. Actually, solving them can be pretty straightforward, if you have the right group of people together. But if you're working on the wrong problem, well, that's not very productive. No. So I think it's consistent with what Bob was saying. If you can help turn an organization of people into a learning organization, then you're going to have a steady stream of relevant problems to be working on, and then design's value and the team's value will be fully realized. So, as a leader, to your original question, like what advice do you give? It's that, as a designer, we're sort of taught formally, about making, but design leadership is about making that happen through many other people, most of which are not designers. Right. And so you have to realize that the design problem isn't the thing anymore. It's actually the approach or the playbook that you put together to get to the thing. So I'll leave it at that.
I feel like you guys are designing a common mission, within your corporation. In businesses, no matter how big or how small, you find that there are silos, right, within divisions and departments. And when you look at the logistics of how these things come together, it's really, how do these divisions, departments work together well? And even within a department, a team, how do they work together well? But when you have a common mission, then you understand what that goal is and everybody knows what to bring to the table, I feel like.
Yeah, and there's an interesting tension with that as well, because sometimes doing cross-cutting things, while as designers, I feel like we tend to have a default setting, which is to integrate and synthesize and have everything work together well. Well, that can also complexify things. That can slow things down. And so recognizing when to pull back and allow things to be small and move fast versus trying to tie it all together with a bow is sometimes counterintuitive, but the right thing to do.
I mean, I had 7 managers in the 12 years I was at GE, all corporate officers. Change was constant. And what we found in our design organization is every 12 to 18 months, we had to step back, go lock ourselves in a room somewhere away from the office, hopefully in someplace nice, and pivot and realize that not only did we have to change our approach, the structure of our organization perhaps, but I go back to, we had to change our behavior, how we interacted with businesses, how we interacted with the culture of a place. And I'm not just talking about the global culture, but how people behave. I've worked in companies where there was I don't know, lack of a better way of saying it, there was a tough guy culture. Finger in your face, baloney on you, I'll clean that up. Baloney on you, you don't get a vote. We don't need you to come here and help us make it cute, Schwartz. I mean, that's a place to start. And I've also worked in cultures where it was so overly polite. You didn't know what the hell they were trying to say to you, but there was a knife in your back while they were saying it and a smile on their face. So you have to be able to be nimble enough as a leader. And that's different than the difference between leadership and management is to seek to understand it, take a moment and see which way the wind is blowing before reacting, in order to navigate all of these, not only personalities, but all these business dynamics that are happening. And then the 3-dimensional chess game of them happening globally is an overlay. And eventually you're going to ask us a question about what artificial intelligence is going to do to us. And maybe that's a good segue for you, Alistair. I don't know.
Should I run with that, Angela? I don't know. That one came out of nowhere. Artificial intelligence.
You're right there. You know it. How do you guys lead upwards, right? You guys are the closest. I mean, as people move through their career, everybody wants to move further upstream. That was the adage we all hear. And to have a seat at the table. And how do you, this is leading, most people, I think, start with leading their teams. I love mentoring, I love leading. And then there's a point, I think, in management where you realize it's time to lead upwards too, right? Because that is the way to move up, to help guide those that you collaborate with and work for, directly above. We're talking C-suite, advisory boards, tell me about what your experiences are like there, because not that many here have had that experience. What's it like? What do you do?
Oh, Alistair.
I mean, I would go back to the theme of focusing on learning and problems. Like everyone has problems to solve, and the extent to which you can help them solve them, they will be more successful. And so I think a good practice is just to look around you and say, how do I make that person up there more successful? And that's a problem statement, right? And that's what we're good at. So that's my answer.
I guess I'll yes and it by saying, in order to be promoted, first of all, you're in charge of you. Nobody's in charge of your career but you. And if you're sitting around for somebody to say, hey, we want to promote you. You're doing a really great job. No, it's not about being an advocate. It's not about self-promoting in that sense of the word, but it is taking charge of your own career and having a vision for yourself and having a personal board of directors, people, friends, family, doesn't matter who it is, that you can call on to kick you in the backside if you're whining, or to help you solve tough problems you can't sort out. Don't think you can do it all yourself. A great leader understands when to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's the opposite of that. And all those things taken together, being open to mentorship, going to leaders above you and being curious about what they're doing, the challenges they have, learning from them, asking for mentorship. Everybody likes to be asked for their advice. It really helps to open those doors, and it shows that you have the lights on and it's not all about you. And
you guys,
those are powerful things, at least they have been for me.
You guys have just heard it from the top guys. These are some people designers who have moved so high up within companies and know it. Look, we are all, I love how you just framed it, Bob. You are in charge of your own future. You are in charge of your career. Own it. Absolutely. Talk to those around you. And this, I think one of the most common comments that I get is that people say design feels like it can feel like a very lonely career. If you are in a company and you feel like you're the only one, one of a few within a company, and there are so many allies right here in this group. I hope all of you guys connect with each other. So much insight and collaboration that could be had here, supporting each other. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point, Angela. And to build on that, from when you're a senior leader in a company, it's not often obvious, but setting a bigger stage for design and growing it is not obvious to anybody else. If you're the top designer in a company, then you're the one who knows what bigger looks like. You're the one who knows what a more comprehensive approach to design looks like. No one can do it for you, and so you have to demonstrate that. You have to show what that can be, and that, to Bob's point, is something you got to just own.
You have to be an entrepreneur.
Even within a corporation, right? Owning, your own path.
There's no difference. Most in-house design teams are in-house consultancies. We have a business model. I had numbers to make. If I wanted to grow my team, I had to find the resources. Nobody was going to hand them to me unless I could make a case for it with data. You have to show up every single day, every single moment as a business person in the context of your discipline. That's a hard lesson that I learned. Looking like a designer, wearing a black shirt, doing all that stuff. It doesn't, so what? If it's cool, they will come, doesn't work. You have to be a business person, and designers don't always do a great job of that. And we whine a lot. I whined plenty in my career until, I got smart enough because of a couple of good swift kicks in the pants to recognize, wait a minute, you're no different than the CFO or the chief marketing officer or anybody else. You're there to serve the customers and to help the company grow. And you need to understand what everybody else's problem is. If you're gonna, you said it before, Alistair, if you're gonna make a difference, that is the learning environment. Part of it is on us. Yeah, I'm a designer. I'm trained as a designer, and I spend time as an innovator, and I love the creative process. But most of the time, I fly around on airplanes, I go to meetings, and I type on a computer and talk on the telephone. I mean, it's that stuff. It's the business of design at this level that is critical for you to embrace.
I think you both mentioned, well, and I just heard what you were saying about the business of design, right? I think a lot of you come into this thinking that we'll always be creative, and our work will just, majority of our work will be creative. And I know how many people tell me when you move up the ladder, how much of your work is really creative versus diplomacy or business, right? And then the other thing that I heard is, no matter how big a company, we are still dealing with people, right? Business still is run by people, and it's understanding the different people that you work with, that you're collaborating with, that you're working for. Alistair, I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, and if anything, there's a lot about design approaches and methods and strategies that we can systematize and put together a playbook and an action plan and everything else. It's the people you can't predict. Right? People, like Bob describes some archetypes, some of which are more appealing than others, but you got to figure, that's the part of the puzzle that you have to figure into your approach. So being smart about that and actually getting good at it, right? Working on it, having empathy and recognizing that it's part of the world around you. I mean, I personally, I was brought up in Canada and found myself in New York, as you know, Angela. And boy, culturally, there are some things I had to learn about, being direct about New Yorkers. Yeah, and it was amazing once I figured it out. But I had to be hit over the head with a 2x4 a few times to get the actual words out that I was meaning. So anyway, recognizing that people are part of the puzzle, I think, is super important.
And that overlay, I have to add this, overlay then showing up at a conference room table in Malaysia, or in Shanghai, or in Dubai, or all the other places we go as global leaders. And the shift from Canada to New York, or I'm a Jersey boy winding up in the Midwest, that was easy compared to understanding what it's like to navigate in places where the customs and traditions and the way of doing business. This is out of a book. I didn't make this up, but in some cultures, we play ping pong. We banter back and forth. In other cultures, they play chess. And if you don't understand the culture you're walking into, and you think you're going to go to Bangalore, India, present, and play ping pong and banter with your colleagues, oh no, they're playing a game of chess with you, and you can be in checkmate real fast if you don't pay attention to that. And that's another lesson. You don't learn it except by a slap in the face when it happens to you. And you realize when somebody's saying yes, that doesn't mean they agree with you. It's just saying they heard what you said.
Kelly, I would love to, you guys, I would love to start opening this up to Q&A because I know the audience here probably has so many questions for you. Is there anything that either one of you guys feel that you want to share that you think the industry might want to, you know, for all the design professionals that are out there, you know, what's some advice or insights that you have that you might want to share?
Are you asking the audience or Alistair or me?
I'm asking you guys while we open up Q&A for people, if anybody has questions for you. And by the way, for those of you guys don't know, my laptop died 2 days ago. And so I'm on a new iPad. And so I'm like trying to focus on the camera over here. So I'm just using this, so I don't see the chat.
Well, there is a question there, it looks like.
What do we got? And if Kelly, if you want to bring them up. We have tons of comments here. And actually, I have one before we start. MBA, right? You guys are in the work. I think you've mentioned and referenced so much about understanding business. Is having an MBA a viable, you know, accreditation to have and skill, you know, knowledge to have?
Sure, any knowledge. It depends on the environment you are in as well.
Be a
but you guys,
person. Never
you
stop learning.
Never stop learning.
There's no boundaries. Everything is blurred. The collision between scholarly inquiry and the Ubering of everything is upon us. You have to be sort of an intellectual free agent and not imagine yourself in anybody's lane. You're in a lot of lanes. You have 40 spinning plates in front of you, and they're all wonderful. You have to decide how to prioritize, sequence, and make choices to keep them all spinning properly. There are some questions. There is a question in chat.
I see one from Sean. Like the field of architecture, do you feel that the greater design community will adopt a similar system of licensing professionals as a method of establishing a base level of creative expertise across the varied disciplines of design? That's a good one.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
And
I
have conflicted.
Right?
What's that?
Well, I mean, how do you do that when there's, you know, user experience, strategy, you know, customer experience, UX, industrial design, architecture, you know, all these categories. You know.
Well, the question is why would you maybe, you know, and that's where I'm conflicted. I remember feeling years ago that fairly strongly that, you know, there's people saying they're a designer and coming in doing a design job, but then almost like misrepresenting what design can do because they didn't have like the rigor maybe behind that certain discipline. And so I think that's a point worth talking about. And I'd love to hear Bob's point of view on it. But the other side of it is career-wise, I've seen so many good things happen when people pop, you know, across the spectrum of disciplines. And if there's a license in their way from practicing something, then that would be a blocker. I mean, you know, when I started as a designer, there wasn't such a thing as UX, right? Or design technologists, and everything was different. And so if I had to go and get relicensed to do something, I mean, that would create a lot of friction in one's career. So I think the net benefit is career mobility wise, is seeing people move across domains of research, digital, physical design, and even management. A lot of really great experienced design leaders end up being phenomenal program managers of design. It can have, it's a matter of where you have the most influence and impact. But so I guess the short answer is I don't see it happening.
Well, you brought up a really good point. Having worked with creative professionals in the world of design, and I don't think any other archetype of individual pivots more than designers. I mean, I think the combination of such disparate different abilities and acuities and people in design, I think, pivot more than any other profession. And it's from that pivoting that you can pull from past experiences from different worlds, right? And it's your combination of all those abilities that allows you guys to see something different than anybody else. More so, I tend to see. And you're right. So you're right. If there's accreditation, does that slow that process, right? Is it about duration, or is it just about a quality of insight?
I agree with what Alistair said. And this conversation's been going on for 50 years, longer. When I was executive director of IDSA, it would come up every 2 to 3 years as the board changed over. Should we have licensing? It was more about our own insecurity and sense of ourselves and feeling less than somehow. Licensure grew in architecture, so buildings wouldn't fall down. It didn't have to do as much with proof of, well, I have this education and experience. Yeah, there was some of that, but it was a safety and efficacy question. And yes, there's certainly plenty to do with product liability and the stuff that we do as industrial designers with very blurred boundaries. I agree with Aleister. It'll never happen because there isn't. You can't get your arms around. Well, what is that? What are these professions? You can say UX, and that's 15 or 20 different subspecialties. And same thing with industrial design, up, down, and sideways. It's a three-dimensional chess game. I don't see it would happen. I can tell you that for interior architects and interior designers, there's a huge battle going on in state legislatures to allow those folks to be able to stamp or approve plans without an architect or an engineer for non-structural things. And the architecture lobby is railing against it because they're threatened by it. It's passed in legislatures in 18 states, and not in Wisconsin where I live. And we're working on that. There's a bill in our legislature to do that. It's been going on for 2 years. And
Wow.
And surprisingly, the Republicans are for it, the Democrats are against it. I'm like, my head's gonna explode. But yeah, you have to work really hard on something like that, let alone, and they're already CETA certified, and they have to take a licensing exam to practice. The architects would have you think that they're all interior decorators. Baloney.
We've got another question from Nancy Perkins. I've got Nancy. We've got to interview you. I can't wait. We have to have you on a podcast. Agreed about certifications. The question we always asked, what would the test be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Right.
I wouldn't want to take it.
Yeah, we'd all flunk.
Nice to hear from you, Nancy. Nice to see you virtually.
Good to see you, Nancy. Well, what if how do you inspire someone to want to lead within corporations? How do you inspire someone who would want, what is the value of doing this, right? Why would someone want this? What is what gratification do you get from doing what you do?
There's a smart ass answer, and there's probably a
Give me the smart ass answer, and then the other one.
I don't know. I can tell you that designers on my team who are earlier in their career, you reach a crossroads. For me, it was about 6 years into my working life, about 100 years ago, where I got to this crossroads. What do I want to do? Do I want to keep designing stuff and be in a Wacom tablet, or sitting there at a drawing table with a nail line maybe back then? But or do I want to start getting involved in getting stuff done and the visioning and working the issues and so on. And usually when I can see that in a designer who's earlier in their career, I set about the task of torturing them. I give them responsibilities that they never had before, and see what they do with it. But at the same time, it requires a lot of close coaching and being at them. We'll take the youngest person on the team and put them in front of the C-suite. You know, it's a chance to see what's there and a chance for that person to have an experience to know whether this feels right. And then you can kind of keep adding to that over time. You know, our jobs are nurturers. We're teachers. We're supposed to be bringing forward the people behind us. The most wonderful thing you can see as a leader is you know, you leave a role or somebody leaves a role and someone from your organization can move up into it because they're ready and you help them do that. Very, very rewarding.
Yeah, I think it's about, I think your question was how do you inspire them? And I think it's about modeling. You know, you do your job, do it well, and across all those dimensions that Bob mentioned. And the folks that are inspired to take on that kind of role will, by owning their careers, self-seek it out. And then how do you help them? And I think it's a process of experimentation. You know, in a very practical sense, it's like get an intern. You know, how do you like being responsible for somebody else's performance, developing them, coaching them, mentoring them, you know, and various ways of experimenting with leadership. People will find that they're either enjoying and excelling at it or not. And it's a two-way door decision.
Can you guys tell us, and by the way, Nancy would, I'm sure Nancy has some perspectives on this. If you're open to coming up on stage as well, let Kelly know and we can bring you up. I would love to hear from you as well and your take on this. Nancy's been in the design industry as well for a very long time, seen it from all sides within corporations and being a longstanding contributor to IDSA. By the way, absolutely understand the impact that organizations have. They speak for our industry, right? Just a quick nod to organizations like IDSA, TMI, you know, IXDA. As our industry grows, you know, these are the places where we can congregate and share our best practices, you know, and inspire each other. You guys have been involved, right, in IDSA, I think in DMI, I think for quite some time now, right?
Yeah.
It's Bob, but yeah.
I mean, I found it extremely valuable. It's really been opened the door to the network that you get. You know, in one case, let's talk about the hard stuff. There was a point in my career 20 years ago where I took a very senior job in a company, VP level job, and I was there 100 days. They changed their strategy and they threw me out. I had 2 kids in college, you know, et cetera, a house I hadn't hardly unpacked. They decided they wanted to source everything in China and Mexico, and they should have never hired an innovator. I had a team of 40 people, and all of a sudden, you know, we're letting you go. Wow. So what do? It's not easy to, you know, the higher up you go, those jobs, there's fewer of them. But this is where the professional network saved my life. But because I had invested in, you know, being active in the IDSAs and the DMIs, there was a lot of people I could call. Some I hardly knew, but I could kind of use that to open the door. And it helped me to network, you know, one begets another. And that's how I found my way to, in that case, to Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, I love that. Alistair, what about for you? You know, what's a challenging moment in your career, or talk about IDSA for you and how, you know, what's it done for you in your career, how you see it?
Well, similarly, it's a network outside of your immediate sphere of the company or practice that you're in. And so the number of people that I've met by being involved, mostly with IDSA, especially earlier in my career, was, I mean, that some of my closest friends in design came through that networking, and by friend, that's a support group like Bob talked about. And we're in touch frequently and share things that we learn or problems that we have, and you know, that's, you can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where I've met you guys.
True.
That's a perfect example. Exactly. That's where we met. And,
Yeah.
you know, Alistair and I were colleagues in Motorola days. We hadn't talked to each other probably in 10 years, but we just picked up where we left off. You know,
Yeah.
we didn't have to get over the hill climb of once we caught up of, you
Right.
know, well, who are you and who am I? And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Community. This is also that comment, you know, community gives you the platform, gives you the network, helps you identify opportunity, helps you see yourself even in a different light professionally, right? So, okay, I love it. You guys have shared such amazing advice just to tell us what it's like from your seats or your positions within this industry affecting change. Where can people stay in touch with you and follow you?
We can
Or
probably
connect?
both be stalked on LinkedIn.
That's probably the best bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
Yes.
great.
And people, don't be shy. Reach out to these guys. They're amazing individuals and great leaders in design. Thank you guys for sharing your perspective and inspiring us.
It was fun and great to see both of you.
Yes, indeed. And to all my friends, and I miss you too, Sarah Keating. Put it in the chat.
Yes, I know.
And
I love.
see you, Nancy. Okay.
All right.